Hello everyone, welcome back to Wittgenstein. Let's go ahead and hop right back in and pick up where we left off. He's about to explain what different things called languages have in common, which is exciting. Consider, for example, the proceedings that we call games. I mean board games, card games, ball games, Olympic games, and so on. What is common to them all? Don't say there must be something common or they would not be called games, but look and see whether there is anything common to all. If we look at them, you will not see something that is common to all, but similarities, relationships, and a whole series of them at that. To repeat, don't think, but look. Look, for example, at board games with their multifarious relationships. Now pass to card games. Here you find many correspondence with the first group, but many common features drop out and others appear. When we pass next to ball games, much that is common is retained, but much is lost. Are they all amusing? Compare chess with noughts and crosses. Or is there always winning or losing, or competition between players? Think of patience. In ball games there is winning and losing, but when a child throws his ball at the wall and catches it again, this feature has disappeared. Look at the parts played by skill and luck, and at the difference between skill in chess and skill in tennis. Now think of games like Ring a Ring of Roses. Here is the element of amusement, but how many other characteristic features have disappeared? And we can go through the many other groups of games in the same way, can see how similarities crop up and disappear. And the result of this examination is we see a complicated network of similarities overlapping and crisscrossing, sometimes overall similarities, sometimes similarities of detail. I can think of no better expression to characterize these similarities than family resemblance. For the various resemblances between members of a family, build, features, color of eyes, gait, temperament, etc., overlap and crisscross in the same way. And I shall say games form a family. And for instance, the kinds of number form a family in the same way. Why do we call something a number? Well, perhaps because it has a direct relationship with several things that have hitherto been called number, and this can be said to give it an indirect relationship to other things we call the same name. And we extend our concept of number as in spinning a thread we twist fiber on fiber, and the strength of the thread does not reside in the fact that some one fiber runs through the whole length, but in the overlapping of many fibers. But if someone wished to say, there is something common to all these constructions, namely the disjunction of all their common properties, I should say, now you are only playing with words. One might as well say, something runs through the whole thread, namely the continuous overlapping of those fibers. Alright. The concept of number is defined for you as the logical sum of these individual interrelated concepts, cardinal numbers, rational numbers, real numbers, etc. And in the same way the concept of a game as the logical sum of the corresponding set of subconcepts. It need not be so, for I can give the concept number rigid limits. In this way, that is, use the word number for a rigidly limited concept, but can also use it so that the extension of the concept is not closed by a frontier. And this is how we do use the word game. For how is the concept of a game bounded? What still counts as a game and what no longer does? Can you give the boundary? No, you can draw one, for none has so far been drawn, but that never troubled you before when you use the word game. But then the use of the word is unregulated. The game we play with it is unregulated. It is not everywhere circumscribed by rules, but no more are there any rules for how high one throws the ball in tennis, or how hard. Yet tennis is a game for all that, and has rules too. How should we explain to someone what a game is? I imagine that we should describe games to him, and we might add, this and similar things are called games, and we do not know any more about it ourselves. And do we not know any more about it ourselves? Is it only other people whom we cannot tell exactly what a game is? But this is not ignorance. We do not know the boundaries because none have been drawn. To repeat, we can draw a boundary for a special purpose. Does it take that to make the concept usable? Not at all, except for that special purpose. No more than it took the definition 1 pace equals 75 centimeters to make the measurement of length 1 pace usable. And if you want to say, but still, before that it wasn't an exact measure, then I reply, very well, it was an inexact one, though you still owe me a definition of exactness. But if the concept game is uncircumscribed like that, you don't really know what you mean by a game. When I give the description, the ground was quite covered with plants. Do you want to say that I don't know what I am talking about until I can give a definition of a plant? My meaning should be explained by, say, a drawing in the words, "The ground looked roughly like this." Perhaps I even say, "It looked exactly like this." Then were just this grass and these leaves there arranged just like this? No, that is not what it means, and it should not accept any picture as exact, in this sense. Someone says to me, "Show the children a game." I teach them gaming with dice, and the other says, "I didn't mean that sort of game." Must the exclusion of the game with dice have come before his mind when he gave me the order? One might say that the concept game is a concept with blurred edges. But is a blurred concept a concept at all? Is an indistinct photograph a picture of a person at all? Is it even always an advantage to replace an indistinct picture by a sharp one? Isn't the indistinct one often exactly what we need? Frege compares a concept to an area, and says that an area with vague boundaries cannot be called an area at all. This presumably means that we cannot do anything with it. But is it senseless to say, "Stand roughly there"? Suppose that I were standing with someone in a city square and said that. As I say it, I do not draw any kind of boundary, but perhaps point with my hand, as if I were indicating a particular spot. And this is just how one might explain to someone what a game is. One gives examples and intends them to be taken in a particular way. I do not, however, mean by this that he is supposed to see in those examples that common thing which I, for some reason, was unable to express, but that he is now able to employ those examples in a particular way. Here giving examples is not an indirect means of explaining, in default of a better, for any general definition can be misunderstood too. The point is that this is how we play the game. I mean the language game with the word game. Seeing what is common. Suppose I show someone various multicolored pictures and say, "The color you will see in all these is called yellow ochre." This is a definition, and the other will get to understand it by looking for and seeing what is common to the pictures. Then he can point to the common thing. Compare with this a case in which I show him figures of different shapes all painted the same color, and say, what these have in common is called yellow ochre. And compare this case. I show him samples of different shades of blue and say, "The color that is common to all of these is what I call blue." When someone defines the names of colors for me by pointing to samples and saying, "This color is called blue, this green," the case can be compared in many respects to putting a table in my hands, with the words written under the color samples, though this comparison may mislead in many ways. One is now intended to extend the comparison. To have understood the definition means to have in one's mind an idea of the thing defined, and that is a sample or picture. So if I am shown various different leaves and told, "This is called a leaf," I get an idea of the shape of a leaf, a picture of it in my mind. But what does the picture of a leaf look like when it does not show us any particular shape, but what is common to all shapes of leaf? What shade is the simple in my mind of the color green, the sample of what is common to all shades of green? But might there not be such general samples? Say a schematic leaf, or an example of a pure green. Certainly there might. But for such a schema to be understood as a schema, and not as the shape of a particular leaf, and for a slip of pure green to be understood as a sample of all that is greenish, and not as a sample of pure green, this in turn resides in the way the samples are used. Ask yourself, what must the shape of the color green be? Should it be rectangular? Or would it then be the sample of a green rectangle? So it should be irregular in shape. So should it be irregular in shape? And what is to prevent us from then regarding it, that is, from using it, only as an example of irregularity of shape? Here also belongs the idea that if you see this leaf as a sample of leaf shape in general, you see it differently from someone who regards it as, say, a sample of this particular shape. Now this might well be so, though it is not so, for it would only be to say that, as a matter of experience, if you see the leaf in a particular way, you use it in such a way or according to such and such rules. Of course, there is such a thing as seeing in this way or that, and there are also cases where one sees a sample like this will in general use it in this way, and whoever sees it otherwise in another way. For example, if you see the schematic drawing of a cube as a plane figure consisting of a square and two rhombi, you will perhaps carry out the order, "Bring me something like this," differently from someone who sees the picture three-dimensionally. What does it mean to know what a game is? What does it mean to know it and not be able to say it? Is this definition somehow equivalent to an unformulated definition? Is this knowledge somehow equivalent to an unformulated definition? So that if it were formulated, I should be able to recognize it as the expression of my knowledge. Isn't my knowledge, my concept of a game, completely expressed in the explanations that I could give? That is, in my describing various examples of kinds of game, showing how all sorts of other games can be constructed on the analogy of these, saying that I should scarcely include this or that among games, and so on. If I were somehow to draw a sharp boundary, I could not acknowledge it as the one that I too always wanted to draw, or had drawn in my mind. For I did not want to draw one at all. His concept can then be said to be not the same as mine, but akin to it. If someone were to draw a sharp boundary, I could not acknowledge it as the one that I too always wanted to draw, or had drawn in my mind. For I did not draw one at all. His concept then can be said to be not the same as mine, but akin to it. The kinship is that of two pictures, one of which consists of colored patches with vague contours, and the other of patches similarly shaped and distributed but with clear contours. The kinship is just as undeniable as the difference. And if we carry this comparison still further, it is clear that the degree to which the sharp picture can resemble the blurred one depends on the latter's degree of vagueness. For imagine having to sketch a sharply defined picture corresponding to a blurred one. In the latter, there is a blurred red rectangle, for if you put down a sharply you put down a sharply defined one. Of course, several such sharply defined rectangles can be drawn to correspond to an indefinite one. But if the colors in the original merge without a hint of any outline, won't it become a hopeless task to draw a sharp picture corresponding to the blurred one? Won't you then have to say, here I might as well just draw a circle or heart as a rectangle, for all the colors merge. Anything and nothing is right. And this is the position you are in if you look for definitions corresponding to our concepts in aesthetics or ethics. I have a message. In such a difficulty, always ask yourself, how did we learn the meaning of this word, good for instance? From what sort of examples, in what language games? Then it will be easier for you to see that the word must have a family of meanings. Compare knowing and saying, how many feet high Mont Blanc is, how the word game is used, how a clarinet sounds. If you are surprised that one can know something and not be able to say it, you are perhaps thinking of a case like the first, certainly not of one like the third. Consider this example. If one says Moses did not exist, this may mean various things. It may mean the Israelites did not have a single leader when they withdrew from Egypt, or their leader was not called Moses, or there cannot have been anyone who accomplished all that the Bible relates of Moses, or etc., etc. We may say, following Russell, the name Moses can be defined by means of various descriptions. For example, as the man who led the Israelites through the wilderness, the man who lived at the time and place and was then called Moses, the man who was a child who was taken out of the Nile by Pharaoh's daughter, and so on. And according as we assume one definition or another, the proposition, Moses did not exist, acquires a different sense, and so does every other proposition about Moses. And if we are told N did not exist, we do not ask, what do you mean? Do you want to say, or etc.? But when I make a statement about Moses, am I always ready to substitute some one of these descriptions for Moses? I shall perhaps say, by Moses I understand the man who did what the Bible relates of Moses, or at any rate a good deal of it. But how much? Have I decided how much must be proved false for me to give up my proposition as false? Has the name Moses got a fixed and unequivocal use for me in all possible cases? Is it not the case that I have, so to speak, a whole series of props in readiness, and am ready to lean on one if another should be taken from under me, and vice versa? Consider another case. When I say N is dead, then I say something like the following may hold for the meaning of the name N. I believe that a human being has lived, whom I, 1, have seen in such and such places, who 2, looked like this, pictures, 3, has done such and such things, and 4, bore the name N in social life. Asked what I understood by N, I should enumerate all or some of these points, and perhaps in different ones, all or some of these points in different ones on different occasions. So my definition of N would perhaps be the man of whom all this is true. But if some point now proves false, Shall I be prepared to declare that the proposition N is dead false, even if it should only mean something which strikes me as incidental that has turned out false? But where are the bounds of the incidental? If I had given a definition of the name in such a case, I should now be ready to alter it. And this can be expressed like this. I use the name N with a fixed meaning, but that detracts as little from its usefulness as it detracts from that of a table that stands on 4 legs instead of 3, and so sometimes wobbles. But should it be said that I am using a word whose meaning I don't know, and so I'm talking nonsense? Say what you choose, so long as it does not prevent you from seeing the facts. And when you see them, there is a good deal that you will not say. Okay, gonna call it right there. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're making good progress on Wittgenstein. I know it might seem like we're slow going, but I think this is good progress. If you wouldn't mind giving the channel a subscribe and the video a like, I would super appreciate that. Thank you so very much. You have a good one.